And we're live.
I
Did it work? I
don't
think it
know.
worked. Yeah, it worked. We're good.
Awesome. Are you starting this or am I starting
Oh,
this?
you started. You started, big boy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Tavern Talks, where we interview people each week and talk about tabletop. Tonight we have a special guest that is outside of the D&D realm, which is great. We've been moving past the D&D realm for many months now, and we figured let's have a conversation about something other than Dungeons and Dragons tonight. So we brought Will at World's End, who seems to be more involved with one of my favorite RPGs that we've talked about many a times, called The One Ring. So real quick, I'm going to let Will kind of give us his little speech of who he is and what he does, and then you know, we'll drink some drinks, we'll talk some talks, and we'll see what rabbit holes we go down. So, Will, take it away.
Okay, so my name is Will, and I run Will at the World's End. It's a YouTube channel where I primarily talk about the One Ring, either doing reviews, talking about the different books, or I write my own adventures that then people can download and play if they want. Yeah, it's mainly the One Ring focused, but then I also, like you guys, branch out and do some other stuff. So I've looked at a few other systems as well, but the One Ring is definitely the bread and butter.
So, this could be these first couple questions could be interesting then.
Okay.
So I always start with three questions, and the first question is, when did you get involved with tabletop role-playing games?
Mhm. That would have been I started sometime around maybe like 2016 or 2017. I'd seen some stuff about D&D without really knowing what it was. And then I was walking through a game store with my father-in-law, he was big into tabletop miniatures, so he does a lot of World War II stuff.
Ooh,
So we were going to play a game with him, and I saw the D&D starter set, and I was just like, let's have a go. So that was my first introduction to it. Um, and I kind of find how I've described getting into D&D is sort of like I forget what island it is in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, but they say like it can only be found by those that already know where it is. And
hmm.
what I found trying to figure out how to play D&D, it's just like the only way you can learn to play this game is by having somebody that somehow already knows how to play it. So I messed around with the starter set for a while and couldn't figure out how it was supposed to work. And then she's like, okay, I'll just go to a game store, got somebody there to teach me, and then was like, okay, now I get it. And then the rest is history.
Nice. So, what what then caught your attention with Dungeons and Dragons or with tabletop in general? What
Yeah.
was I mean, for somebody who grabbed the book and goes, "Well, this looks cool," and
Mhm.
then doesn't know how to play it, hasn't figured out how to play it, and you're like, "I got to figure out how to play this." What kept that interest going? Like, why did you want to know more?
Well, yeah, the sort of behind the scenes of getting to the starter set is kind of embarrassing for where I am now. But there was a YouTube channel that I follow that like lots of people have probably seen it. It's Corridor Digital. They do lots of like now they do a lot of like stuntmen react or VFX artists react to stuff. So you've probably seen that if you're on YouTube. And they used to make a lot of just cool short films. They were doing that while I was coming up in college. And then they put out a video that they're doing a little D&D campaign. And I was very derisively like, oh, those nerds, like that's silly. And then realized like I know nothing about D&D, like other than kind of the stigma that it was for nerds. I was like, that's nonsense to dismiss this when I don't know anything about it. And I also love fantasy. So I was like, oh, all right, so I'll watch it. And the guy that was doing the DMing on that, Sam, he has like all like the Dwarven Forge stuff. So he had like this awesome table set up and just like watching it, I just could not fathom how he had a plan for every single thing that the players did. Like they would just, or what they suggested. He seemed to like have an idea for that. And I just couldn't figure out how that was supposed to work, but it obviously intrigued me. And then so got the starter set and didn't have the Dwarven Forge, but still got the starter set and was able to start.
Don't go down that road. It's very,
Yeah.
very expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
he's got a
that
lot
like
of that.
yeah, that's the freedom of storytelling and just the expansiveness is what like got my interest and made me want to figure out how to play it. Uh,
Nice.
and then
So what was the first thing once you actually played your first game that you were like, "Oh, okay, now now I want to play more." Like what was the interest that you caught once you actually played the game?
well, I guess it was I pretty much right away started writing stuff in
Mm.
D&D. It's almost immediate. As soon as I played the one game, and I lucked out, like the first DM that I had, he was really good. And when I showed up at the game store, the rest of his party didn't show up. So I was just like, asked the people at the front, like, can I sit in with a game? And they were just like, yep,
Yep.
Marcus doesn't have anybody today.
Mark
So
doesn't
like,
have anyone.
sit
Nice.
with him. So I was like, all right. So Marcus just was like, all right, here's how you make a character. He walked me through that and then just did like kind of the most basic scenario, like, oh, you're sneaking up on a goblin camp or whatever.
Mm.
Um, and so that night, I was able to go back and look through the starter set again and go, okay, now I can like actually piece this together. Um, and like the obviously, the Lost Mines of Phandelver is a very popular kind of starting adventure, and it's got so many twisting passages you can take and like
Oh yeah.
the stuff you can miss. And I was like, that's so fun that you might play it again. I don't know if people like often play it as players multiple times, but just like there's new stuff that you could find, even though it was there the first time. And so yeah, just like this big world. And I had been into writing like when I was in elementary school, like many people, I was like, I'm gonna write a fantasy book. And so I started writing that and wrote up until high school and then got distracted and fell out of writing. Um, but then with D&D, I was like, okay, here's not a railroad, but like sort of a roadmap of like
Mm-hmm.
some rules that you can use. So it gives me a little bit of focus instead of just like you can write about anything. And
Anything, right?
there's some focus to it too.
Hmm.
So yeah, wrote some little campaign, had some friends over, and wildly misjudged how long D&D takes. So I was like, this thing, we'll be able to play it in like an hour or two, and then it was a very late night.
Very late night. You're like an hour or two. You're like 6 hours later.
Yeah,
It's been a rough one.
which I still find hard to judge how long a game will take. Um,
Um, and it's funny you're saying that because Chuck here is about to start put on his first game in a different system,
okay.
Hmm.
and that's one of the conversations we've had. It's pacing. Like, how do we know if we want to do a 3 hour game? How many? If you want to get certain things done, how much are you actually going to get them done?
Yeah.
3 hours in most systems lately, though, other than systems that are very quick.
Mhm.
I would say you're only going to get maybe two encounters at max out of the
Mhm.
way. So for those games like Phandelver in particular, where you're kind of squad battling through rooms,
Mhm.
people think that that's going to be like I'm going to go through the entire building in
Yeah.
one session, and you're like, yeah, if you've got 9 hours,
Mhm.
like. Um, And that's where I think you start seeing the change from how people were playing back in the day and how people are playing nowadays is that they kind of start to combine those combats, right? Like they pull all the monsters into one or two rooms
Okay.
instead of one monster here and then two monsters here and
Okay.
then one monster here. And it just makes it easier for the game master to kind of plan around. Um, a lot of scenarios. If you have all the building blocks, you can just piece them together as you go.
Yeah.
So you got into writing,
Mhm.
or well, you got back into writing
Yeah,
now
back
that
in
you
it.
had a platform to do so. And it sounds to me though that you went straight from I played one game of Dungeons and Dragons to I'm game mastering and this is what I want to do.
Yeah, it was pretty much like it's like almost a decade ago now, which
Yeah.
is a little weird. So yeah, I don't remember. It might not have been quite that immediate, but it was pretty soon. And
Yeah.
then like luckily the next week when I went back to the game store, more of the group was there and there was three people in particular that like I really clicked with. So then I kind of pulled them aside. So we still stayed with the main group, but we also had our own game and my wife wanted to play or was
Uh,
wanted to play, was willing to play.
willing to test the waters.
Yeah. But she wanted some women to play with. So the three people that the new group that I was part of, there were
Mm.
three women that were awesome. So we invited them over, and then so I started doing a campaign that lasted for yeah, a couple of years with them, which was
Wow.
awesome. And then fortunately we moved away, so we tried the Zoom thing for a while during COVID, and it worked for a while. But then at some point it was just like Zoom is Zoom is no
Zoom,
fun.
like I said, I mean, I have to do run Zoom because most of my players are across the United States. But I will say there is something special about a bunch of people sitting around the table having a good time. Um, I also am very fond of the idea of not having a camera on me at all times when I'm playing games. Uh, I enjoy it, but at the same time, there is definitely something about that intimacy of just your friends,
Yeah.
and you can say all the dumb things you want to say, and you can mess up 1,000 times, and only the four people that are with you are gonna never know, and more normally it just becomes a funny joke. So it's not like what it is doing it live or anything like that.
Oh yeah, we never did it like live online, but just the four of us
Yeah,
playing.
yeah.
Um,
But I think, like I said, I think you do lose a little bit when it's just a screen.
mm.
Um, I always tell my players, like, I don't care if we play online, you will have video on. I've tried audio only, and it's the most boring thing
Oh
I've ever done. I'm like, how do I know what you're thinking? Or like, are you
yeah.
pausing? Are you looking at your phone? Like, what are you doing?
Got a little taste of what 1,000 teachers or 1,000,000 teachers felt like for a couple of years
Right,
there.
exactly. Um, and then we moved into doing like I do convention games now and things like that. So playing with new players is always a constant for me. However, it just seems to be one of those things where having that core group is always just the best of
Mhm.
times because you have that synergy and all that fun stuff. So when did the shift then, and this is going to kind of pass the three questions at this point. When did the shift go to when did you say, okay, Dungeons and Dragons is cool, I want to try something else? And was that first thing the One Ring, or what did you
Uh,
bounce to a couple different systems?
yeah, it was the One Ring, but it took a long time because I remember again, bad me in the game store. They had a copy of Adventures Middle Earth up on the wall, and I was just like, oh, that's probably like a just like a cheap cash grab, and I never even took it down off the wall, never even once. Even though Lord of the Rings is my favorite thing in the world, but I was just like there's no possible way I could learn two rule systems, and even though I think Adventures in Middle Earth is just a 5e
It's
port,
5e's version that
yeah,
they
so it would
converted.
have been
Yeah.
basically the same, but I didn't know that at the time. But it was just like I don't have the headspace for multiple game systems. And at the time, I thought like I can make a Tolkien-esque campaign and I can write that kind of thing with the D&D rule set. So I was like, I don't need a different rule set. But then at some point I saw some little ad or something for the probably the One Ring starter set, and then just started looking up about that, and then saw that it was written by Francesco Nepatello, who I hadn't done too much stuff with him, but I'd played the War of the Ring, which is kind of like this massive risk style game that
Hmm.
lasts several hours, and was just blown away by how authentic it is to the world and how well he was able to adapt the
Mm.
story elements to mechanical elements. So really, like that was the selling feature for me. It was that Francesco was attached to it, and like he was the head guy. So yeah, I'm gonna check that out. Um, so then, yeah, bought the core rules, and
I
then
didn't realize I didn't realize he wrote War of the Ring or War of
yeah,
the Realm
mhm.
as well.
Yeah,
So
like a lot of if there's like a Lord of the Rings game that's very well received, he's probably attached to it somewhere. Like
Hmm.
he has a lot of history there.
yeah. Um, so what then made the switch? What caught your eye about the One Ring?
Off the start, just Francesco and Lord of the Rings. Like
Okay.
Lord of the Rings is my probably my favorite book, so I was like,
Yeah.
cool. And a lot of the reviews were saying that it handled the themes and elements of the story well. So that was kind of key for me. Um, and by that point, like I've been playing D&D for I don't know, 5 years or something. So I was like, all right,
Hmm.
I'm ready to at least check out something new. And then yeah, reading through the core rules, just quickly like, oh, this is why you have a dedicated system. Like, yes, you can write a Tolkien-esque story in the One Ring, but you have to, or sorry, in
And
D&D,
yeah.
you have to do a lot of changes. Like at some point, it's going to become not 5e anymore, anyways, because you're going to have to
Right.
like rip out so much stuff and replace so much stuff. Um,
Well, and the big thing I noticed with the One Ring compared to D&D is that they still had to go through the simplicity of classes were something, races were something. They still did the skill checks, all that stuff, and they kind of combine it in the One Ring
right.
because you have now just your heritage. Because in the One Ring and in Lord of the Rings in general, each race was very different. It wasn't just a reskinned human every single time. There was very major differences between the cultures and between the way they lived and all that stuff. And you could see it in the One Ring.
Mhm.
I liked the very old school version of Dungeons and Dragons where things felt a little more at risk.
Okay.
Um, and taking a lot of the magic out of D&D is kind of part of what you had to do in order to make it um, a Lord of the Rings based game.
Yeah.
Uh, I've never looked at. I mean, I have access to Adventures of Middle Earth, but I've
Okay.
never looked at it because I was like, why would I do the D&D version if I have the real thing?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Like I
um,
think the main selling feature is that it's very hard to get people to switch away from D&D. So it's like if you want to run this and you cannot get your group to be willing to try something new,
right.
and so I have looked through the Lord of the Rings role playing, which is like the new 5e port for the
Mhm.
one, and it does do a good job. But
So
it's nice.
I give you a recommendation if you can find it.
Right.
Look up Merps just
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
lore. Just for the lore, it's fantastic.
I looked through a few of those for one of my big
Second
projects I worked on recently.
edition, like it's like the second edition version of Middle Earth's role
Yeah,
playing game. So, and it was a lot of the stories in there. You're just like, did did this like get pulled? Like, it definitely breaks into a lot more of those lore of the lore that you aren't used to when you hear about Lord of the Rings.
yeah,
Um,
definitely in the One Ring community, lots of people like anytime somebody's asking for suggestions of like how to get stories, people are like, yeah, just go find the old MERP modules.
yeah,
There's something in there.
there's
Like,
something in there, right? Especially in areas that you're like, I can't find out anything about this area. And they're like, oh no, there's an entire book on it. I can guarantee you. It was written 25 years ago, but there's an entire book on it. Um, so let's see here. We've done, we went down this. How have you felt with the change in risk in the One Ring compared to D&D, or how have your players dealt with that as well?
yeah, well, like the new players that I'm playing the One Ring with, which is very rare that I can get friends together. But I think I think we just started with them playing the One Ring, so I haven't been able to play with the Valkyries, who are the old women we played with. Haven't played with them for the One Ring, so I don't know the difference, like how they would take it. But having recently played some D&D as a player, definitely off the start, it's still pretty deadly. Like my character got to 0 hit points with some sturges or whatever the horrible mosquito things are.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
off the low levels, there's definitely some danger in D&D still. Um, yeah, I do like the combat system in the One Ring, like piercing blows in particular. And this, like, it can still feel like this in the One Ring, but I feel like this a lot in D&D, is that it can often feel like your group's just there with baseball bats, just whacking away at a big number, just like we're just waiting for this to get small. Like,
hmm
no matter how big your hit is, if it's a big monster, it doesn't really matter. Like you're
right.
just taking a slightly big chunk of numbers away, but it's still just slowly trying to get that thing down to 0. And combat can drag.
hmm
Still can in the One Ring, but having those piercing blow options, that works both ways. It's not like just the heroes get it against the adversaries. Adversaries can get a piercing blow on you just with a essentially a natural 20, like the equivalent.
Right.
So like that that keeps you on your toes. Yeah, so I like that. And then not having healing spells or healing potions means you're gonna feel the consequences.
hmm
Like, oh, we'll just run into this goblin camp. You can, but you're gonna know about it.
Yeah.
So for those who are ignorant, what's the piercing blow element there?
Oh yeah. So um, essentially, what your hit points are in the One Ring, it's not it's not like every time you lose endurance is what it's called. It's not
Mhm.
you necessarily getting cut. It's your endurance. So it's just your energy to be able to fight back. And then when you get down to 0 endurance, that's like you just can't fight anymore, and the bad
Right.
guys have actually stabbed you. But then if they roll a 12, like the One Ring uses a d12 and d6s, so if they roll a d12 essentially, and get a 12, the either you or the enemy basically actually gets a stabbing blow, and it like actually does damage. And the player heroes can take 2 piercing blows, even at the highest level. I think that's right. You can only take 2 before you like take a long time to heal up. And then adversaries can take between 1 and it can go up. But essentially on your first round in combat, you could just get a piercing blow on an enemy and then they're down, or they could get a piercing blow on you. Um, so having
And that
that,
can even be, and the crazy thing with the One Ring is that it can happen even before combat starts,
right.
which is the crazier part. So every time you start combat, every time, but there's what is called the round, a volley round. So anybody who has a ranged weapon can fire before everybody clashes weapons, and that can cause a piercing blow as well. So if you think about old school medieval movies where everybody's firing the 2 volleys of arrows, and then the one random guy beside you just drops, that can happen in the One Ring.
you
So
have like an armor throw that you can do to negate that. So it's not necessarily just, oh, the weakest enemy happened to roll a critical hit, so you're
yeah,
just immediately out of the game. There's ways to save against that, but it can be deadly. And then
Right.
and I also like how the One Ring handles weapons. Like I think D&D is starting to make a few changes to this, but like spears in D&D,
mhm,
like nobody's really excited to use a spear. I don't feel they're kind of like the lesser weapon you want, like a sword or something like that. But historically, and in Lord of the Rings, like the history, spears are like the main weapon for centuries, and like
right.
the world, every single civilization on the planet at some point was like, yeah, spears are the way to go. And so
Spears of-
spears and axes and swords, they all work differently. It's not just that they deal a different amount of like damage; they all have special mechanics for them that make them work a little bit differently, which I really
Yeah,
appreciate.
'cause, axes don't even get piercing blow, I don't believe.
They can, but I think there's less of a chance.
Yeah.
Like when you make the roll, you roll a d12 and then a couple d6s, and if you get a 6 on one of the d6s, you can have a opportunity to potentially deal some extra elements to your attack.
Yeah.
And bows, if you get one of those 6s, you can add some numbers onto your d12, like like +3, so you have or something like that. So you have a much higher chance of getting piercing blows. And then axes, it's like +1. So you don't get those as much, but axes deal a lot more endurance loss. So if
Hmm.
you're just trying to whittle down the number, axes are the way to go. If you're trying to get piercing blows, spears are the way to go. And then swords are sort of like they're sort of an in between.
Hmm.
They're good for stabbing and they're good for slashing, but they're not as good as either.
As either. Yeah. And
Interesting. That does sound like an interesting combat system. Why haven't you invited me to play this, James?
because I've been moving.
No excuse.
Once the table's up and running, we can play all sorts of games. I've only got 9 different systems I got to learn how to play in the next like 3 years.
You and me both, brother. I got
Yeah,
practice to
so
do too.
yeah, we've got Lord of the Rings on the docket. He's got Power Rangers on the docket. We've got Alien on the docket. Werewolf, um, Daggerheart, Shadow Dark, uh, like all these different games where we want to play, but it's just you have to learn the whole new system and you have to understand all the combat and the mechanics.
Highly recommend Alien. I ran the starter set a couple months ago, and it was
I've
possibly
played Alien. Alien's a lot of fun.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was possibly
I've
one of
yet
the
to play it.
most fun games I've played. Like,
yeah,
and I'm not even like I've seen a couple of the movies. I'm not even a fan of the movies, but like the game is awesome.
yeah. The game is pretty cool. So unlike D&D, where there is a grid and there is combat like that, um, the One Ring is very thematic,
Mhm.
which is kind of something that I've really enjoyed because I can play it without a grid. I can play it without any or without any map whatsoever, or I can make it fun, put all the map out. But it's all based on stances.
Mhm.
And you're either up close in person, or you're far range. There's really no option. Um, and then that basis and the monsters always go last, which is kind of interesting. So you have your skilled, unless they're surprised.
Yeah.
So that's different. Um, so combat's cool. Ha have you had a lot of experience yet with the other systems within the One Ring, and how have you dealt with those?
Yeah, you know what? I haven't played with a group that much, and I don't know if we have had a council or anything like that.
Like councils and journeys are much different than we're used to in
Yeah, I did
rings.
do a journey, and I don't love how the journey rules work. And I've been trying to figure out what I don't like about them so much. And I think part of it is the extremes, in that um, essentially with a random dice roll, your character could get a wound on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I've stepped on a twig and
yeah,
jammed it in my leg.
yeah.
Like,
Or you can meet like uh, what's it? It's not a joyful sight. It's like a chance meeting with somebody. Maybe like you might run across Gandalf or something.
right, yeah.
And kind of those extremes that I don't like to be decided that randomly on something
Mm,
that's, I don't know, not as narrative as like sort of regular gameplay.
yeah.
Because like in the books, yeah, on their journeys, bad things happen and they can lose some stuff. But any of the really big things, like I can think of Bomber falling in the river in Mirkwood. Like
Hmm.
it's not just like that's not written in a sort of montage format. It's not like, and they were traveling through Mirkwood for
Yeah.
a while, Bomber fell in a river and then was asleep for a week. It's like, no, at that point, you really take time to pause, and it's its own solid scene there.
It's his own solid scene,
And so
right?
I feel like the extremes of the journey rules, like, yeah, I don't like that, how random it can happen. I
Hmm.
like to have a little bit more of a plan for those big encounters. And same with the chance encounters where you might meet a really handy NPC. Like, if as a lore master, you're not really anticipating that. And then it's like, okay, I have to either come up with a character on the spot or bring in a lore character.
Hmm.
But then does Gandalf, is he just now part of the party? Because that changes the mechanics of it a lot.
Right.
Or does he just like show up and be like, hi guys, I'm going that way, and then heads off? So like that wouldn't be terribly entertaining for the game, I don't think, because it's not.
Right. I mean, he does that, but yeah, he's
Yeah,
like,
but
here,
he
you
stays
stop
with
in
them
for
too
a
long.
couple, a
Yeah,
couple scenes, and then I gotta go do this thing, so I'm just
yeah.
gonna
So
head out this way.
it
Like,
could work, but and yeah, I don't know, and that won't obviously come up very much. That's the extremes
yeah.
of the dice. That's if you're essentially rolling a 12
Mhm.
or a zero. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's not. Yeah, it won't come up much. I like it for trying to like plan ahead. If you're like, okay, in this session, my players are going to be traveling. Uh,
Hmm.
either I'll come up with some set encounters of whether that's having to cross a river or enemy encounters, or if I'm kind of stuck, then I'll roll some random dice and let it decide, and then go, okay, I'll try and build something like that. That's sort of how I like to approach it more than on the fly when a group of people is looking at you, being like, and then what happens? You're like, whew, okay, yeah, you meet somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what you can do, and this is something I've done, is I've used random encounters in a few different games, both in Dungeons and Dragons and in the One Ring. I wrote those out just in case they happened, and
right.
that way I was ready for them if they happened. So it's like, oh, I know they're on this travel this week,
Mhm.
so if they actually roll the 12, here's the scene that's going to activate. Here's the scene that's going to activate if they roll a zero. So like
Right.
you're absolutely right. It's just I would. Um, you get excited to use those scenes, but I would just kind of hold those in your pocket for when they
Right.
actually show up.
Mhm.
Because then it makes your players go, when you can immediately do
Yeah.
it, like, how did he know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Secrets.
Yeah.
um,
But I do like that Francesco and the team try to incorporate that because journeys are a big part of Tolkien's work. So like
yeah.
trying to specific mechanics, I'm glad they tried to. I just don't love how they work, but
Yeah. And
so,
then it changes a little bit for Moria, but not much.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, actually in solo playing, which I haven't done a ton, but I found the journey rules work a lot better for that because so much of that I'm
mm,
not planning ahead, and then it's just me, so I can take as long as I want to be like, okay, this is the role that I've got. Again, like having the players waiting and trying to make stuff happen,
right.
it's harder. And then the solo rules, there's quite a lot more, like they're expanded. The
Hmm.
rules, like all the events have a whole bunch of extra stuff. So there's a lot more to pull from. So yeah, I use it there, but I don't use it as much in actual play.
Yeah, the One Ring. Yeah, I've never played the solo rules yet. I kind of want to try it just to see if maybe I would enjoy that as well. Like, or
Yeah,
come up with new ideas. Be like, "Ooh, that was a neat idea. Let's play with
it's
that."
a different experience. Like
Yeah.
playing with a group has a lot of benefits, but then solo play you can really direct the focus. So if you're trying to run a fairly serious campaign, but you have somebody at your table that's always trying to make it funny, there can be like this
This
like
tension, right? Yeah.
yeah, this tension. Whereas when it's your game, you're like, my character is the only character. I just have to focus on the story that I want to focus on.
Yeah.
And you, as you want, but you you sacrifice some of the benefits of playing with a group when you do that.
Oh yeah. So haven't I tried council? I'm still not. I think I need a little bit more experience with council to understand exactly how that works.
Mhm.
Um, I even looked it up. I'm like, okay, what, how, like, who else has ran a council? What does it feel like? Um, eh,
Yeah, any kind
it's
of like role play heavy scenes, which is what a council should be, uh,
right.
just like essentially you have to get 5 successes. Um, then it's hard to be like try and role play, but also it only comes down to your role essentially. Like
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh, so, um, trying to think. So we've done council, we've done combat. Um,
although sort of on that, I don't think they specifically call it out in the One Ring rules, but in the Lord of the Rings role playing for in the council section and the journey section, there is like this is the XP you get for a council and for a journey, which I like
mm,
that call out instead of just like the only way to get XP is by killing goblins. It's like no,
yeah.
you also build your character by doing councils and by doing journeys. So it's a good highlight for that.
Yeah, and I think the One Ring just it's based on time.
Mm.
Everything is based on time. So and it's based on real life time. So it's every hour you get technically 1 point to add to your character, no matter how fast you play. Now you can
Right.
elevate that or whatnot,
Mhm.
depending on how actual fast you're going through a story. But it's still only one by one.
Yeah, I do like that as well. But it's just like, yeah, this is just how much XP you get, and it just doesn't matter what you did in that game.
Right. And it always makes it nice for those players that are like, "Do I level this week?" Like, you know when you're gonna level. You see it every week. You know exactly what you get. Um, and being ready for it. Uh, but yeah, what is your thoughts on? Because this is something that I'm having an issue with the treasure table and the idea of treasure in the One Ring.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, it's good if you're not terribly interested in treasure, but if you do like, yeah, knowing I have exactly this much gold, I have this much, I don't know,
Yeah,
this golden crown, I have this silver spoon or whatever. Like, yeah, it's not, it's much more abstract. It's just you have treasure points or you don't. Um, yeah, it doesn't bother me too much. Like I'm not
okay.
with the stories I want to tell in Lord of the Rings or in a Middle Earth setting. It's not about getting all this gold and then going out to the shops and buying all the new gear. It's
Right,
like if people get new gear that's fun, it should be part of an interesting story. It should be like
right.
found this in this tomb where we fought this enemy and they had a really cool bow, and now the archer character gets that, and that's much more memorable later to be like, oh, this is the bow that I got here instead of it was at I don't know some shop in this town. I just paid 50 gold for it and I got it. Like
Yeah, no.
that's not as interesting. So yeah, the treasure system doesn't bother me too much. I don't.
Okay. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I was curious. I was reading through as like how they do the treasure tables and things like that, and I was like, mm,
Mhm.
it's swaying around to look at the same idea because my players are going to want memorable items to be found, but at the same time, like I don't just want you to just randomly go out and try to find this item. Like
Yeah.
there has to be a story to it, right? Like,
Yeah. I think like there's a lot less novelty in the One Ring than there is in something like D&D.
mm,
You can have a character that can turn into a bear. You can have somebody that's shooting lightning bolts, or there's like, uh, yeah, there's so much novelty and there's so many weird creatures. In the Lord of the Rings game, you're going to be facing a lot of goblins. Like that's going to be the main thing. So if you're wanting to get into that game, it really has to be a good story. Obviously, any RPG should have a good story that you're doing, but you can fall back in D&D on a lot of novelty. Just being like,
Mhm.
it's a fun, weird creature that we faced this week. That was entertaining. You're not going to get
Right.
that in the One Ring as much, and so with gear and everything, it's going to be a lot more intentional. If you just let it be kind of random, I think the game wouldn't work terribly well.
Yeah. So how did you write some of these modules or some of these adventures? Because the structure for Lord of the Rings is much different than D&D.
Yeah,
So
I think you mean like the landmark adventures that they
yeah.
have. Yeah, off the start, um, I think when I first started, I was just like, well, I think there's 6 playable cultures in the core
Mhm.
book. I was like, I'll try and make an adventure that focuses on each one of those. Because one of the problems when you're trying to run pre-written adventures is that your characters don't have any ties to that storyline. And so a lot of times when there's a conflict, they might be like, oh, this isn't really my problem, and I don't really care what happens here, so I'm not going to get involved. So I was like, I'm going to pre-write stuff, but how do I make it so that it's easy for lore masters to like really connect to players? I was like, well, I'll look at it from a culture perspective and go, like, why would I play the Rangers? If I want to choose this culture, it's because I want something about that. So I'll write a
Mhm.
story that really focuses on them. Obviously, you can have other cultures in there and other callings, but that's going to really focus on them. And I just went through each one, and then so hopefully that'll be fairly easy for a lore master to take and go, okay, I have a character that's Hobbit of the Shire. They're probably going to like an adventure that's easily tailored to them. And then you can obviously change like a few names and stuff around to
Mhm.
really tie it to them. So that was the starting point, and then I've since moved beyond that. Um, and then the system, like I'm trying to think if D&D doesn't really have a sort of flow chart of how you write an adventure, whereas the One Ring has a like this is how you write a landmark adventure. Um, so yeah, I just followed that
You just
system,
follow the flow chart, then yeah.
which I don't even necessarily love. So I've changed a little bit in some of my more recent stuff, um, but it's a good starting point. And I like the open-endedness of the One Ring adventures. So
Mhm.
one of the things I find with D&D is like I call it like a advent calendar adventure, where it's just like you're going down a long hall, you've got a bunch of doors, and you're like, oh, look in this door. Is there any monsters I want to fight? Nope. All right, I'll close it. Just go to the next door. Oh, open that. And that can be pretty boring. And
Mhm.
then it can be really slow if you have players at every single door. They're like, okay, we're going to listen. Okay, we're going to check if it's locked. Oh, we're going to pick it. We're going to roll for check for traps. Like you have every one of those at a closed door. The, the game can drag hugely. Now
Yeah.
the benefit of that is that it's pretty easy to run for a new GM, because they even if they haven't really looked through the book ahead of time, it's again almost like a flowchart. They're just like, okay, the character said they go into this door. This is what you encounter. It's sort of its own universe. Like the enemies in the next room, for some reason, don't hear you
Nope.
necessarily, even though you're having a big fight, and then you just move on to the next one. So it's easy to run, but it can get boring if it's not run well. Uh,
Right.
and so I guess a lot of the free league stuff and the One Ring in particular, it's not necessarily like this room has this enemies, this room has this one, this room has this treasure. It's a little more like you've got your location, and it'll give a few descriptions of some notable locations within that, whether that's rooms or just like this hilltop or this forest. And
Mhm.
then at the end of the chapter, there'll be the schemes in trouble, which is like there's a goblin band. This is what they're trying to do in this area. So then you, as the lore master, try and incorporate where that works for the story. And instead of being like, well, the characters need to get to this room before they trigger this cutscene, it's like, well, the cutscene's going to come to them because this is where mechanically or like fits thematically or narratively.
Right. Yeah, the narrative twist the One Ring gives is much different than what we would experience in a Dungeons and Dragons game. Um, I actually think it's very similar to the same way that you experience the narrative scene in Power Rangers or in a lot of the Renegade games
Okay, so play
as
those.
well. So, but kind of pull Chuck in over here on this
Oh no,
too.
you're good. No, look, I'm enjoying this. I'm learning more about Lord of the Rings than James has given me in the past couple of months.
No, you're learning more about the One Ring.
Well, fair
Lord of
enough.
the Rings.
Okay,
You want to
fine.
learn Lord of the Rings? I'll get my 6-year-old down.
Yeah. So No, that's really cool. And like I said, it kind of is how I'm trying to write
Mhm.
the modules that I'm getting my players through right now. Um, I'm trying not to twist and start going back to the way I'm used to in Dungeons and Dragons. Like I'm trying to pull farther away from it as I can, and using some tools that I've found make it a lot easier as well. So
Yeah. One of my early, fairly early videos was just talking about how to use horror in essentially like D&D or the one like it was I think it was just RPGs in general. But like D&D is a great system that it can generally be played for everything. But again, if you can find something that's tailored specifically to a theme, whether it's Lord of the Rings or horror, like I've got the Alien books behind me, you can learn a lot. And so I hadn't played Alien at the time, but I knew a little bit about it. And there's like the critical or not, is it critical hits or what's the like the serious injuries? There's like a full page that's just like
Mhm.
you get hit, you roll on this table potentially, and your head might get ripped off, or you might just get hit in the crotch really hard, and you're like can't walk for a bit. There's
Right.
there's lots of mechanics in that help the themes of horror. So I was talking about that, and then the video basically ended just being like, so like just try different games, and even if you only want to play D&D, you're going to learn stuff in other games that you might go, oh, I'm going to pull this element into my game. I remember one of the comments, most of the like 99% of the comments on my channels are very positive, but this one person was just like so angry that I would dare to like suggest anything that wasn't D&D. It was just like everything else is terrible garbage that's just trying to be D&D. It's like what a weird position to take. Like,
Yeah, like
That's
not what
the
we
hill
were
you
going
want to
for
die
here,
on.
bud.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was
He's
Wizard.
doing
That was a
well. I don't
Wizards of
mean
the
to
Coast
defend it.
employee, is what that was.
A WotC employee. There you
Yeah,
go.
Watchy employee. Um, but yeah, that's that's cool. Have you ever used anything from Alien in your One Ring game?
I haven't too much because I haven't actually played too much. But I do like the critical injuries table. Like,
Yeah.
obviously you get a piercing wound in the One Ring. So I think bringing that in to be like, it's not just a piercing wound. It is this specific piercing wound. There's
Hmm.
things like that. And then like in Alien, you can get your arm ripped off, and then you have like I don't know an hour maybe until you bleed out if it's that long.
Yeah.
Uh, or you might get medical attention, but your arm is gone. Like
Right.
not you don't have
Yeah.
a regenerative spell that's going to heal it. You're as long as your character is still alive, that character does not have an arm.
You're
So I
fine.
think
Yeah.
bringing that into the One Ring.
Cyberpunk is similar to that. They have their own table for, critical hits where you can lose limbs, eyes, what have you. And you're down for X amount of time while you get, some chrome implanted.
Cyberpunk's a little different because I can at least re-implant it. Now I now
Yeah,
have a chrome hand instead of a normal hand.
Right, but the point is still the same. Like
Yeah.
there's a, you get hit hard enough, you're gonna lose something.
Oh yeah.
yeah. And then that
Um,
would work in the themes of Cyberpunk of you're slowly less human essentially. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're more machine than man.
right. I'm thinking there's another system out there that it was similar to that as well. We just talked about it. Is it? Might be Shadow Dark even.
You've been studying it more than I have, so
I know I have. Uh, um, but there's a couple other systems out there too where
there's
you
consequence
get
to getting hit hard
you
enough.
get consequences yeah or you get consequences to dying even. So like if you die and you get brought back,
Okay.
there's a consequence to it. It's not just you get to come back. Um,
Well, we talked about that with one of our other previous guests. That's something they do at their table if someone doesn't want to like die and they want to come back.
Mhm.
There's a cost. They lose
Yeah.
something when they come back.
That was Shadow Dark because that was talking with James.
See, there we go.
Yeah.
Shit. But
Uh,
that was a special thing that he did. It wasn't a Shadow Dark rule. That was something that he had come up
oh,
with.
I thought he
later.
said it was in the book, but I could be wrong. Either way, what if
Well,
you're curious about that? Go watch a couple
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah,
It's on YouTube.
yeah. Do that.
I
Go
haven't
watch it.
I haven't played Mothership, which is essentially like legally distinct Alien. But in that, when your character has to make a death saving throw, again, I don't know the exact rules, but I've heard it something along the lines of you have to roll, but it's under a cup. and nobody gets to see what the roll is until somebody actually physically comes over and checks on you, and then they get to flip it up and be like, "Oh, no, you're dead," or like, or you're alive. So that's a fun little. That's easy to implement in any game, but just
I
to
love
keep
that.
that.
I like that.
I love that.
My players might be getting that one.
Yeah.
My Dress to Quest player is gonna hate me because they all die all the time. They're just not
I
gonna
love.
win. Uh, I do like rolling behind the table. I like not telling players that they've got, how much time they have left. Uh, at my tables, all my players know that if you don't concentrate on the fact that somebody has died,
Okay.
the enemies will concentrate on the fact that somebody has died. Um, because I don't play the game where we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. No, 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 we don't play that game. Uh, so if my players go, if one of my players drop, they know for a fact that if before the enemy comes around, nobody at least takes an initiative to try to protect the player or save the player, that depending on the enemy, they're probably going to double tap and then it's going to be game over. So, uh, but that depends on the type of enemy too. If it's a creature that maybe doesn't have that kind of intelligence, they're going to just kind of pass over, like, oh, it's dead. Okay, move on. The next threat. Somebody that's militaristic, like orcs or something like that, they're going to kill it until it stops breathing. Done. Uh, and I've had one player hate me for it, but that's fine. In game, they didn't hate me for it out of game. They hate me for it in game. So we still play with them. But yeah. So have you experienced um, that shift in mentality of death in the One Ring compared to Dungeons and Dragons? And how have you dealt with lethality and things like that
Yeah,
in
not too much yet because my games have been very far and few between.
okay.
So, um, yeah, so we've pretty much only done like a few little intro scenarios that I'm still trying to get the rules down and stuff. So I've been fairly lenient, um, but it's just nice to have. And again, like I want to get back more into the solo playing because I've done a little bit of that, but I have about say like 3 hours a week to work on this stuff. So it's like, well, either I can play a solo game or I can write my next adventure, which is honestly that's kind of the part that I enjoy more is the creating
Mhm.
playing. So that's usually what I do instead is just build.
That means next time I run a behind the scenes game, I might have to invite you over. We can all play.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Well,
yeah,
actually, the new starter set's going to be coming out. It's supposed to be at the end of next month.
yeah.
Uh, so I've got my crew. We just were playing D&D here the other night, so I'm going. I brought it up to them, and they said they're willing to play. So um, I'll be trying to hopefully play through all of that if I can, which will be my first kind of many games back to back.
Maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll get the start key.
Yeah.
Just
So,
giving him more ideas, Will. Just more ideas for him to like not follow through on because of everything else going on in life.
That's part of the RPG hobby.
yeah, it is. Um, no, I think the next game we're going to be playing is Shadowdark as our home game
Surprise.
because we're going to move the kids to it because it's a lot less complicated than Dungeons and Dragons and there's a lot less you have to worry about, which is fantastic.
Yeah, but the one thing you have to worry about is nuts. The lights.
Oh, lights, yeah, that one's fun. I suggest this in every game. The
Yeah,
One Ring will have this in my game. I guarantee it because it's so much
what is
fun.
light? I haven't played Shadowdeck.
So the concept in Shadowdark is that when lights go out, shit hits the fan. Um, and lights have a timer that is out of game timer.
Okay.
It's an hour
Yeah.
long. It's an hour long out of game timer, and you don't have light spells in Shadowdark. So, and things that you do can affect it. For instance, we were trying to get through a very tight hole, and we rolled very poorly, and somebody snuffed out the light on the way through. And when we finally lit the light back up, we were staring at zombies like at the face as soon as we like turned the light on.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
that could be used in Moria pretty well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
trust me, that's where it's going to be used at is in Moria. So I'm
it
looking
was
forward.
very fun.
It was
I
very
think it
fun.
was me. It was me or the goblin
I think it was the
that did
goblin,
it.
but yeah, or you were
I was
passing
passing a torch under there or
through to
something
the
like that.
goblin, and
Yeah, because the goblin was on the other side of the wall. And the torch went out.
yeah, the torch went out as they were trying to pass it to the ghoul,
And
or
then
the
they
ghoul was
lit it.
standing in front of
And there
him.
was like a huge ghost right in front of her, like, oh no.
It was great.
It was hilarious.
Um, but yeah, that's a lot of fun, and it's something I've really been doing over the last couple of years. Is I try to take little pieces from other systems and kind of build my own game, running it. Um, I will say though, piercing blows can be negated by armor and helmets.
Yeah,
I've
so you
noticed
make a
that.
roll that's like you get a better roll if you have better armor, essentially.
Yeah,
So somebody deals a piercing blow, but you have better armor, you might roll to
to
ignore that.
glance it, yeah, and then it just
I think
deals with. Then it just does
you
the
still take
endurance.
the endurance loss, so
Hmm.
you still get whittled down, but you just don't actually get stabbed.
Yeah,
Uh, Even with the best armor, you might roll an eye, which is
yeah.
essentially zero, and you might still lose.
Still gonna lose something. The one thing I don't like about piercing blow is that if you roll an eye during on the piercing chart,
Oh
you're
yeah,
dead. You just
yeah,
did. There is
yeah. Like
no.
I know some people like that. It's really easy to die, but I'm coming, I think, into role playing more from a narrative perspective than a gaming perspective. It's like people made this character because they connect to it and they want to see that character do something.
Yeah,
So just like even though yes, dying in the middle of an empty field because you had the misfortune
I'm
to be
never gonna do that either. Like I can
yeah
completely
like
agree with that.
yeah like
Uh,
if instead of that yeah you have them lose a hand like have
yeah,
them they can still have a pretty severe consequence but let them carry on that character is
yeah,
generally what I
yeah.
prefer to play.
But combat's not absolutely necessary in the One Ring either, though. That's the other thing that people we try to understand because combat is very necessary in Lord of or in Dungeons and Dragons. It's literally 75% of the book.
Okay.
So the One Ring, the goal is not to get in combat because we
Yeah,
all know that you can die. So there's that. Um,
that is definitely a big mental shift too coming to the One Ring. It's just like yeah,
mhm.
every enemy is not meant to be attacked and probably shouldn't.
Yeah,
But again, your story has to be good, and like your NPCs have to be good because you're not falling back on the fun of, oh, I'm rolling dice and like hacking and slashing.
yeah.
And the One Ring really relies on you having a good story
Mhm.
to be entertaining. Otherwise, your players are gonna be pretty bored.
Yeah. Got to learn how to make those dice rolls more impactful.
Yeah, yeah.
That's for sure.
You don't have to roll for everything unless there's a, a
A need
consequence.
for it.
Either way,
Yeah.
yeah, don't roll.
Hmm.
Which that's something that I think needs to be passed down to most systems. Is,
Mhm.
unless there's a consequence behind the roll, don't make them roll. It's
Mhm.
pointless. So unless you just want to do click clicks,
Yeah,
just for the
that's
funds of
fine.
making it sound nice
I
and
like the bath rocks.
Yeah.
yeah. I know there's a ton of people that buy just math rocks just to buy math rocks. So I get it. You want to roll math rocks, but
Yeah.
like when there's no consequence to a roll, then why did we do the roll other than just to make the math rocks sound nice?
Yeah, and so that is like in the current existing like the Shire starter set for the One Ring. I found not as interesting. Like you have to roll to cross the river, and you might fail, and then you fall into the river. It's not like you get swept away or drowned. You're just like a little bit wet. Like I guess that it does teach the mechanics to somebody as a new player. Maybe that's what it's for. But it just like okay, okay, I'm wet a
I
little
mean, the
bit. But
Shires, you're not supposed to be able to die either. So
yeah,
there's,
yeah. So
um,
I think it was an interesting choice to make the starter set entirely Shire focused, but again,
yeah,
it quite pulled it off. And like again, if you're doing that, it needs to be really good. Like your story needs to be so fun to play. And I have heard lots of people that said they had a great time with it. Um, but for me, it was just like there's not enough there to make me want to play these adventures, even though
yeah,
like the Shire
yeah.
book,
The first adventure was kind of, it was all right. I think the most fun is the nostalgia of sitting around a table listening to Bilbo Baggins talk. Like
yeah,
it's kind of was the only fun part. I was like, ooh, I
yeah,
get to listen, like make him. turn into that character for a little bit. It's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
and there's a few little like tie-ins to further characters like Farmer Maggot's dogs and stuff, which
Yeah,
are
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Farmer Maggot, and then you get Balin
Yep.
somewhere in the middle there and whatnot. You can play with it, play as him if you wanted to. But and there's a couple other little stories that connect to the books themselves, but they're those mentioned things that they're talking about, like either when Gandalf was talking to Bilbo or things like that, like the old Took and finding out about the
Oh yeah.
staff that he used or the stick he used and things like that. So,
Yeah,
but
which I stole for one of my adventures was trying to find Bill Roar's club. Um,
yeah,
'Cause I liked that idea, but I didn't find I liked how it was implemented there. So
right.
I stole it from them and made my own thing with it.
There you go. Um, hmm. What else to talk about tonight? Does anybody in the chat have any questions?
That is true. Um, Now there is one question that I know we haven't really touched on. I got like at least two, maybe. Um, One would be, your time DMing and leading games. Like, what bit of piece of advice would you give to someone starting out, like trying to put together a game or something like that, as a new DM?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think like if you're starting out, to really remember that it's collaborative and that you're not just writing a story. Like, and I've certainly fallen into this trap of I've come up with a cool story idea and I really want it to happen, and I'm going to try and like force it to happen because I think it's fun, even if the players don't go that way or the roles don't quite work. And so like if that's your mentality, if you have a story that you want to write and have it happen a certain way, write a book. But if you're wanting to be a GM, then you got to be willing that your story's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. Like nothing, nothing works out when it hits the players. Like they're going to take it in a weird way, and so you have to be willing to do that, even though sometimes it's really hard.
It is. I have my I have my trusty book that I show everybody with me even right today that I read on occasion called the Game Master's Handbook to Proactive Roleplay, and it
Okay.
has been my bread and butter when it comes to understanding that concept right there, which is building the building blocks for running a game and then making them so mobile that you can just kind of grab what you need when you need it rather than a story following exact lines of what you want. And that has become a key in most of my game mastering over the last couple of years, which is most people look at my notes and go, how does this work? Like it's got like random NPCs, random items, random encounters, random this, and it's just like, oh well, if what they're going through connects to this, then I can pull this in real fast, or I can pull this in real fast. Um,
I played with one group, and the guy before playing had told me he was with a student, and he was just telling me how excited he was because he'd spent like 20 hours straight, basically, like writing this campaign. It's like, well,
oh,
that's good, but then you run into the challenge of you've put a lot of work into this, and so yeah, his story very quickly, like our party, like going into some, how exactly did it work? It was like like we were very much like colonizers going in and like getting rid of the barbarians that were there, and they were fighting back. And like if you're from North America and like among other places, you're like, I don't want to do that. Like we've got a history that I don't need to be involved. And so obviously everybody in our group was just like, nope, we're gonna let them be. And he couldn't move past that because he was like, but this is the story.
yeah.
Like, nope. It's like,
Yeah, and there's no buy-in then at that point either,
Hmm.
mhm.
because you can write a very strong directed story, but the players have to buy into the story then. So, and that's the biggest problem. That's the biggest run-in is just you have to give them a want to do whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. And if you don't have that, then it's going to feel very much like you're just pushing them forward.
Yeah.
You, so,
Yeah, so that like similar to why I made the my first adventures culture based. just to like try and make that easy buy-in. So that's another good piece of advice for new GMs. It's like either do that session 0 where you're going, this is the story I want to tell, or like what kind of stories do people want to hear, and really try and connect it to their backstories. Like if you might have a really cool story idea, but if it doesn't connect to them, they're not going to want to play. Whereas if you tie in their storyline, if they're still bored by it, that's sort of their fault. Or like if they don't follow up on those leads, that's their fault. You've done your job. But yeah, you want that player buy-in, or else it's going to be not a great experience for anybody.
Yeah. I've had a player that I literally threw 9 different story arcs or like story hooks at, and they never picked up on any of it. And I'm just like, this is for your character. Like, I'm trying to get you to move your character the way you want to be moved, and you're not picking up on any of this. And sooner or later, I had to do what I call the kick the door down mentality, which means an event happens instead of you waiting for somebody to pick up on an event and push them towards just giving them that nudge. Once they got the nudge, they ran with it. But I'm like, you didn't pick up on any of the signals. Like, I don't know what's happening here.
Hey, I feel like that's a personal attack. I know it's not to me, but I would be that oblivious.
It wasn't towards you.
Oh, I know. I know.
No, you get tortured a different way.
Yeah. Come up with
Because
this
if you
journal
don't
entry on
follow
the
if
spot.
you don't follow the storyline, you make the storyline.
Yeah. Come up with this entire journal entry right now. The fuck.
I did. It was great. It was so much fun. Now, mind you, I warned them first that this was going to be a fully collaborative game, not me creating anything up front, and that the players will write some of the story.
I didn't expect to be writing a journal entry for a dead captain.
Yep, he found a captain's journal, a dead captain's journal, and he goes. I was like, oh, he was like, he's like, can I read it? I said, sure. And I was like, roll. And he goes, okay. And he rolled really high. And I was like, okay, what does it say? And he goes, huh?
Yep.
I was like, you're reading it. Read it. Like, what does it say?
Oh shit! That was my oh shit moment.
And it was great. But then we wrote it down and it became canon. So, I mean, it was a part of the story now that the players want to drive with because of it. So, but yeah.
It was worth it. Do you have, now this is another question that I've been trying to ask everybody. In your time GMing, what has been some of your, or one of your highest highs and one of your lowest lows?
Yeah, there's sort of 2 highest highs that I think of basically every time, and they're both with D&D, but it falls into the when you're coming up with a story, I like to try and think of like give the players what they want, but not in the way that they expect it. And so with the Valkyries, one of the characters, she said like her backstory was that her father had sold her into slavery when she was a kid, and then she like essentially was like a gladiator and rose up through the ranks and eventually got her freedom. And that's kind of where we met her. And right off the start, she said like, when I'm going to find my father character and I'm going to kill him. Like that's her goal. I was like, all right, cool. So like, there's a couple ways you could take that. One is like, her father's could be now a very powerful figure, and it's like a big boss fight to try and get to him.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm going to take it in the exact opposite direction. And so she eventually, like a couple years into the game, we get to her hometown, and she goes to her old house, and it's just ruined. Like the garden that her mom's planted is just like fully overgrown and ruined. All the walls are boarded up. And so she goes inside, and the place is just wrecked inside. Like it clearly has not been loved. And so they're just wandering around through this seemingly empty house, and then they hear a movement, and then her dad's just like passed out on a couch because he's just like, he has lost everything. He's now lost his wife and his other kids, and he's just an alcoholic, and he has nothing. And like now she's coming back with her best friends that have like been through so much and like conquering the world. And there's this person that she has like spent so much time hating and thinking about, and he is nothing. He just doesn't matter. And so that whole session, I think we probably made like one roll. It was just a conversation. Like
Mm.
the other women pretty much weren't playing. It was just like me and Yuri. And Yuri's just talking, and like the whole time I was just like, she said right from the start she's gonna kill her dad, and I don't know which way this is gonna go. And that's really fun. Um, and so yeah, then at the end, she's just like, yeah, I am gonna kill him. And then she did it, and she was just like, I feel terrible about it, and like my character's gonna have to mentally recover from that. But that's the way she took. And just like,
Wow.
and there was no combat there. So it was like, you are like a level 10 monk. Like he is, and you're throwing fists at him, and he is not stopping this. Like you're just able to crush him. That's just how it goes. So yeah, that was pretty fun.
Curious how your other players just sat around probably just
Yeah. They said we're going to go into the kitchen and make some tea, and you can come when you're ready.
There you go.
like, we're gonna give you your moment, and
Yeah.
we'll be back once the moment's over.
This sounds like a little father-daughter bonding time. Have at it.
And we're out.
Yeah, and then
We're
I
gonna
also
go find the local inn and drink while you guys figure this out.
yeah, and then I was able to also do sort of the more power fantasy side of it, where like the hometown, the ruler of it was big into slavery, and then and there was a full like rebellion going on at this time, trying to go against it. So it's like, okay, now you've got a whole bunch of guards, and just like people that you can just mow through. They're just like they're all for slavery, and you can just plow through them. So you still have that element that you probably wanted, but
Mhm.
not in the way that she expected it, I guess.
Yeah, that's neat.
And then my other very fun one was trying to make a horror session. So we were in this like tower of stone that used to be a wizard's fortress or whatever, that was then transformed into a prisoner for evil sorcerers. And then they had to go in to find some artifact or rescue some guy that was locked up in there. And they got there, and obviously some horrible thing has happened. Some magical anomaly has happened, and most of the prisoners are dead. And then a bunch of the ones that are left have been like melded together into those gibbering mouthers.
Mm.
The whole thing was just like, this is just a spooky place. And I don't know if you guys played Half-Life or Half-Life 2,
Mhm.
but there's like the head crab zombies in that.
Yeah.
They're just always making horrible sounds, which like, if you like play it backwards, they're like screaming for help.
Right.
They're like,
Right.
there's still a bit of consciousness in there. So I use that, like all these gibbering mouthers, they're like, sometimes they're like laughing, sometimes they're crying, sometimes they're like asking for help. And then like bodies are just getting dragged around and absorbed, and like it was just horrible. And I had like a couple sort of regular ones, and then there was going to be one really big one that was going to be the boss fight. But the party did not fight any of them. Anytime one of those came around the corner, they just ran. And it was so much fun. Just be like, we're not even going to test out how many hit points or whatever this has. We're just going to get out of there.
Oh, he's over there. I'm gonna go the other direction.
Yeah. So that was a very fun session to run.
So then, what was
A
what
low.
was a low moment in your
Hello. Definitely just like trying to do it over Roll20, and just like, this person's laptop isn't connecting. Oh, this person's phone isn't connecting. Oh, we've got this person's like video but no audio, or like just trying to do that. And so that's why we kind of stopped playing with the Valkyries. It was just like we'd spend the first hour just trying to work tech, and then we'd be like, okay, now it's 10 o'clock at night. We do have to go to bed, but now we're going to play for a little bit. So yeah, that's frustrating. Or like when players aren't feeling it, and they're not invested in the story, and they're like trying to just mess with it. That's the closest I've come to potentially killing a player character. It's just like, yeah, you have made some bad choices, and there's like a whole bunch of guards around here. They just open fire on you with their crossbows, and that's what happens. Which isn't fun. But sometimes that happens.
Well, lucky us, we just got a question from the chat
Oh, nice.
from our buddy Arclight, and he asks us all for the table, what is something you draw the most inspiration from, whether it's like specific video games, comic shows, all that fun stuff. I think we'll let our guest answer that one first.
Okay. Well, that would obviously be Lord of the Rings. Um, Tolkien's work, like,
Easy.
yeah, like it's been, off to start playing D&D, I was like, oh, I don't need to do that because I can write a Tolkien-esque story. Um, and that's something that made me kind of nervous to do the One Ring. It's like, I like the lore and the canon so much. It's how do you make stories in this universe without treading on the toes of the existing lore? But that has turned out to be a pretty fun challenge and involved like really in-depth reading. So I've, I've read the Silmarillion a couple times, but then also reading that and reading the appendices from Lord of the Rings and reading all the little intros. And I just recently read the one of like the Histories of Middle Earth volume. So that's like all the different versions of the story that Tolkien went through. And so it was only from like I don't know, like the start of Two Towers to the Battle of Helm's Deep or something. Like it was only in that section. It's pretty small in this one book, but just pulling out like, oh, this was a storyline that Tolkien was going down and then decided to change. But oh, I'm going to pull that as an NPC out
Hmm.
because that character doesn't exist anymore, so he's coming in here. Or like taking different elements like that is very fun.
So what is one, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, scene or element that you've pulled from that or that you want to pull that you're kind of in the next project to do so.
Oh yeah, that is. I've got a fun one, um, which is that is the current adventure that I'm just writing. Um, so I wanted it to go from the Shire through the Old Forest through the Barrow Downs and kind of follow a bit of that path. Uh,
Mm.
and it's going to be ideally you can play it with any heroic cultures, but starting in the Shire, it kind of makes sense to start with or have Hobbit characters. And Hobbit characters in Lord of the Rings and the One Ring are not terribly good combatants. Your your fighting scores are really low. So whenever I write an adventure for hobbits, I'm trying to think of how can I like what elements can I use that aren't combat centered, but are still fun. So going through the old forest, trying to think of obviously there's like Old Man Willow that it could kind of fight, but it's just a big stationary tree. Um, but in there's Tales from the Perilous Realm, which has the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is like essentially it's supposed to be like different poems and like lore that the people from the Shire have. And
Hmm.
there's a few poems about Tom Bombadil in there. And so in one of those, he gets captured by some badgers, and they like bring him down to their tunnel, and then he's Tom Bombadil, so he's able to just be like, "Nope, I'm getting out of here," and he just
Yeah,
pops down.
I'm gone.
So
Bye.
I've got a fun encounter with the badgers that will ideally not have any combat, but is going to be pretty unique and will I think will be pretty fun.
Nice. Yeah, I've always
What about
liked.
you, James?
Oh, ooh.
Yeah, putting you on the spot now.
No, you're good. Um, it depends on what I'm running. I try to make sure that I look at something that is has some sort of similarity to it. Uh, like right now with the One Ring with Moria, um, I've actually watched. Uh, I've watched the Lord of the Rings again. I've listened to the Silmarillion. I'm trying to think of though. There's a couple other things that I was looking into with it, which is just kind of getting the understanding of how diving into a cave would be like. What would be that experience? Um, I've even watched like clips from like The Descent, like the horror movies, to
Mm.
understand like claustrophobia and shadows and how that aspect kind of drives towards. And thankfully, because we play at Icewind Dale where it's dark and icy and all that fun stuff for my Lord or for my D&D game, I'm taking elements for that one as well. So it makes it kind of a dual hat at the moment. Um, but yeah, it really depends on either what's the current thing I'm watching or and how can I implement that, or what's something that's close by that I can kind of pull from in order to get those emotions or those connections going forward.
If you're looking at Moria, I was when I was like reading that for the first time and doing the review for that, I was also had read some stuff about Howard Carter finding like King Tutankhamun's tomb,
Mm-hmm.
and just like that little there's a quite a famous picture that's awesome. It's well worth looking up, but it's like them just either just before they broke the seal or like just when they opened up the door for the first time. And it's just like it's old black and white photo of them like leaning forward, and there's a couple of the must be like the Egyptian guides, and they've got like either torches or like it's like straight out of Indiana Jones, and they're
Yeah,
looking in, and you don't see what they're seeing, you just see their faces, and then the account of him, the like the second in command there basically is like asking Howard Carter, "Do you see anything?" And he says, "Yes, wonderful things." And it's just like, oh, like I love that for so like
yeah.
Moria of like what does the characters experience when they see a type of city that they've probably never seen before.
Mhm.
Like, that's fun.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, and I dove into a lot of stuff with Moria. Because not only are we doing the have I bought or like I was reading the books and I'm going back and watching like the clips of how they presented Khazad-dûm in um, the Rings of Power even. Um, Also doing Return to Moria, the video game, and I'm kind of piecing these pieces together as to understand the concepts of what needs to be described for a culture that is built on living under the mountains and having these vast communities and cities. But then when you look and you listen to it and you hear it, they're so much larger than just a town or a city. Like we're talking hundreds of feet tall ceilings for just the fact that they wanted to do it. Like there's no concept behind it. What was the and what did that? Was this dwarves? Was this dwarves with mechanical engineering? Was this magical? What was it and how did they do it? And that kind of broke into the next step of what does Moria look like after the original fall and what has happened. Um, so,
Ooh, got another good one from Ark.
Didn't
well,
say
hold
yours yet.
on. You got to
But
answer yours first, Chuck. You're not getting away.
Damn it. Almost. No, it's gonna sound bad, but or well, repetitious, but it's almost the same as you, James. It kind of depends on what I'm trying to run. Um, you know, I draw from a lot of themes in a lot of the pop culture that I consume,
Yeah.
from whether it's um, a cartoon that I've seen, or there's a movie that I like that is like, oh, I really like the themes in this movie. Like if I want to do a horror movie or a horror game, I'm probably going to really draw from Event Horizon, honestly, because the ideas and the concepts that were touched in there, just like the sheer eldritch horror, the mind fuckery that happens in that movie alone,
Hmm.
and the imagery and the callbacks to for each of the characters, it's just peak horror for me.
Hmm.
um, and I would heavily draw upon that. The Power Ranger game that I'm running, Art, cover your ears. No, I go back. I reference the movie to kind of get a feel for how certain things are played out. I try and think of what's already been done, how things are presented, and try and flip.
Power Rangers
I might,
has a
it has a
really
very big story beat to go through, yes, and I'm trying to use that, but also incorporate a little bit different themes, because they what's presented mostly is geared towards kids, teenagers, what have you.
yeah.
So try and elevate the content a little bit, but still keep the same story beats.
Right.
Um, but I love if I can incorporate some story elements from, like, mythology of whatever, whether it's Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology. They all have great just thematic elements to incorporate in. Um, I'm sitting on a game at my house that you know of. Odyssey of the Dragon Lord is heavily Greek inspired,
Mhm.
and I want to dive into that so hard. So
Yeah. I will give kind of a tip though, moving forward for creating adventures and creating NPC specifically. Something I was told by a game master who is very well known. I won't put the name out there because I don't want anybody to go back at them and they're like, no, this is the wrong thing to say. I'm not going to say that to them. You can call me out all you want. I don't care. Um, is pick a character that is not in your
Already.
element or genre, as far away from your element and genre as possible, and bring them in
Mm.
and see what you can do with that. An example of that I've used before, and I've mentioned it on the show, is I got to be a huge fan of Blacklist. And one of my NPCs, Zafon, was designed as Red Reddington for the D&D culture. He was the underworld lord that would not only manipulate what was happening around, he would send the players to do things and he wouldn't tell everybody. He'd be like, "Hey, hold on, come here real quick." And he would talk to one player and he's like, "Hey, I know you're heading this direction. There's this plant. I need you to get 3 seeds. I'll give you an extra 100 gold." Sure, why not? Not knowing what he wants to do with that and not understanding until many, many, many sessions later when they're like, they start putting two and two together and like, oh shit, I did this and he's now moving forward.
You're making
Um,
drugs.
oh, I did so much with that character. You have no idea. Completely broken entire mentality of thought process. It was great because I had told everybody the dragons were dead. There's only 6, and they've never had any more than 6. There's one of each color. Um, and our bard, who was a bard of whispers, College of Whispers, said, I want, he's like, I need you. He asked him to go do something. Well, he snuck into a Myconid colony that was protecting a coral dragon, which was supposed to be extinct and had just been covered over by the myconid fungi. Um, Pretty much went on an entire acid trip for an entire episode, seeing all these stars falling from the sky and landing in the world, and then at the end, the dragon pretty much speaking to him, telling him these are all the dragons that are still here, and it was great because I've been telling them for like 30 sessions that there's only 6 dragons, and that was part of their conflict is that each one of the bad dragons had a nation, each one of the good dragons had a nation, and they were battling. Not to know that there were hundreds of others that they were potentially just hiding. So yeah, that was a lot of
Hmm.
fun. So, um,
Well,
what's our question for Mark?
yeah, I think we got this one, and this might be one that we end on tonight. I
Okay.
think it's a good one. What is one thing you would add to the mythos of the Tolkien world if you had the opportunity?
Huh, that's,
Woo!
Yeah, I got nothing, Ark. I got nothing.
I think the closest I could do for that, like, there's nothing I terribly want to add. But from I think it's the most recent adventure that I've actually put out is sort of an alternate version of events. So it's titled Boromir Lives, and it's what if Boromir didn't die at Parthglen, and instead went by himself to follow Frodo and Sam into Mordor. And so that was the most intentional reading I've done of Lord of the Rings because I was reading it to my kids at the time, and then also just like had a notebook with me when I was reading to them at bedtime, just being like, "Oh, just sorry, I gotta like write down this little like quote." So I was just going through like bit by bit, and again using stuff from the Histories of Middle Earth to see what other versions Tolkien had considered. Um, but
I
just
guess I need to read the histories of Middle Earth now. I'm getting this
it's
stuff.
it's very dry. Like it's if you find the Silmarillion hard, this is drier.
Yeah.
There's interesting stuff in there. Like um, one of
I
the
read the Silmarillion in chapters. Like I read it chapter and then I put it away for 2 weeks. And I pick up another chapter and I put it
yeah
away for 2 weeks.
yeah.
So
So it's not a narrative story in the Histories of Middle Earth. It's just like this is where he thought the story was going, and then he changed his mind. But some like interesting examples are that I think when he got them to Lorien, Tolkien wrote down like a few notes of just like this is maybe where the story will go. So this is as far as this idea got, but it was that Boromir would live and get back to Gondor, and then would become jealous of Aragorn, and I think try and get Sauron to help Boromir overthrow Aragorn so that Boromir could be the king. Uh,
oh,
Aragorn would end up killing Boromir. Like that was a
yeah.
basically that's as far as it got. It was just like a one sentence thing, but there's like a whole
Hmm.
bunch of alternate versions of Lord of the Rings that could have happened. Um, and so doing the Boromir Live session adventure was really fun. Like it was just going by location, just following Frodo and Sam's trail, just being like, okay, what does this location mean to Boromir? What where can it potentially go? And it could have gone big, like he could have gone back to Gondor. And so I might write that at some point. But for that, I was like, that's outside of the scope of this adventure. Like this is just
Mhm.
Boromir's very personal journey to either try and apologize and help Frodo, or maybe the ring is still corrupting him and kind of suggesting like you need to be there to like actually get the job done, just knowing that he'll fall. Um, so that was fun to work on.
Hmm.
I like it. Uh, so I will say I've been diving down this darn rabbit hole for months now, and it's what is the amount of information that has actually been provided on dwarven culture?
Yeah,
There is not as much as I
very
need.
little.
There's very little. So if we're talking, what is one thing you would add to the mythos? It would be understanding anything after during the Deathless up to the rise of Khazad-dûm,
Yeah.
um, because there's a lot of time there. The way they state it is that each hall was created after itself and after itself. So then they get up to 26, I think, or so halls. So it's what happened? Like, where is it all at? Um, and that's just one. The downfall comes from it is that in the dwarven culture, there's multiple dwarven cultures, but you don't really hear much about any of the others, other than very small bits. Like you don't hear a ton about the Blue Mountains, you don't hear a ton about Erebor, other than the fall of Erebor. So there's just these very large amounts of history that have been lost. That would be really cool to dive into those concepts. Even if we go past Lord of the Rings, which there is some concepts after it, where Gimli takes over the Glittering Mountains, which is behind Helm's Deep. What does that look like? And what does that dynamic look like working now with the Rohirrim and that connection? Um, and then last but not least, it'd be really cool to just figure out the uh, what happened to or what is still going on in Valinor at this point after the Lord of the Rings. What is actually going on in Valinor? Because you never hear anything about Valinor after they get to Arda, and then it's game over. So
The Blue Wizards as well. That would be
that too, that would be fun.
hard to explore.
Um, the Blue Wizards. I mean, if you read enough, you can kind of see that one of them was heading towards the room, one of them was heading south, one was heading west. Um,
Yeah.
After that, nobody knows.
Mhm.
So, um, I mean, they barely know the name of them. So, I mean, there's that. So,
Mhm.
there's a ton of mythos that goes with that.
Yeah, and again, even in Tolkien stuff, there's the I don't know what version he sort of ended on. There's at one point there was a thought that they were eventually corrupted,
Hmm.
led magical cults in the East, and then another one based on their name changes. It's like I forget what their names mean, but it suggests that they accomplished their mission, or at least did some good in the East. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, either of those paths, or maybe you could pick one of each.
pick
Like
one
one
of
of
each,
those guys, one of
right?
those.
Like which one got what, or which one corrupted, which one was. And then a lot of for cultural sake, you don't hear a lot about anything outside of this area of Middle Earth. So we really don't know the cultures of the Easterlings. We don't really know the cultures of Dunland. Like those types of areas are very vague and have a lot to explore
Mhm.
for those that have that understanding. It'd be cool to find out the cultural concepts and the cultural mythos that's used to create the Easterlings. Because I don't see the same. I mean, I think they're pulling very heavy into Middle Eastern, Iranian. Indian type cultures because you see the elephants and stuff like that. But at the same time, that could just be partial. Um, we don't know. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of mythos that was lost that
Yeah,
we
if
don't
you
have.
have the, what is it?
And there's still like, and there's like 12 books now too. So
I don't have my camera on. Can you see that book?
Middle Earth Adventure,
Travel. Yeah, it's like a Middle
Traveler.
Earth. So it's a bunch
Middle
of
Earth
art
Traveler.
by John Howe.
Uh-huh.
Like a bunch of his art that he did for the movies. But there's a chapter in there where he just like explores what Rune might look like and what the Easterlings. So he like does pictures of their like settlements and stuff and their armor and stuff. So it wasn't used in the movie. It's just like he must have had a free couple hours, so he just like made some stuff. So it's a cool book to look through.
I might have to go pick that one up.
Mhm.
And who knows what kind of stories I can come out of that one. But uh, yeah, I think the other one I do need to read, the one I want to read, is The Fall of Gondor. That's or not The Fall of Gondor, The Fall of Numenor is
Okay,
the
yeah,
one I want to read. So yeah,
yeah. I read that one. Just what's in the Silmarillion.
yeah. But I know they have an actual book that's The Fall of
Mhm.
Numenor, which is kind of like pieced it envelops onto the Silmarillion a little bit.
Yeah. Mhm.
And the extra notes and stuff that he took throughout it. So um, I hope that answers your question, Ark. It was a lot.
It
So
definitely was a lot. I got nothing to add.
um,
That's a.
well, then how
Oof.
about this? What is a part of Middle Earth culture or Middle Earth events that interest you or inspire you?
Oh, dude, it's mostly just the, you know, I guess that whole idea of the corruption around Mount Doom and just how that just spread. I mean, I'm sure it's all somewhere in the Silmarillion and whatnot, but it's just I've not read
Oh,
it.
it's a lot.
Oh, I know. I understand. I understand we go from big spider to baby spider, but it's still all corrupted. And I
You
have
say
like
spider, and
tidbits.
spider's in there too.
Yeah, I know.
Ungoliant is a thing.
I know. I know. Like I understand a little bit of it. It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
I am reading
Uh,
the Silmarillion to my kids right now for bedtime, which is terrific. And
How long does it take before they go to
oh my
sleep? Good
god.
goodness.
they're awake the whole time. They do not fall asleep. I read it to my wife out loud, and she fell asleep every time very easily. But my kids, not so much. They're up for it. But just tonight, I was reading him a part of the Children of Hurin, and there's it mentions Nargothrond, which is like where Galadriel's brother was king for a while, so
Mhm.
he's dead at this point. But my son was trying to figure out where that was on the map, and I was like, "Oh, that's down here." And he was like, "Oh, right, it's like it's beyond the guarded plain." And I was like, "No, I think the guarded plain's like the area around Gondolin." And he was like, "No, no, it's not." And then I look on the map, and it's like, "No, he got it right. It's the guarded plain. It's between like Doriath and Nargothrond." I was like, and he's 6 years old, 7 years old.
Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah.
Goodness.
That's awesome.
Well, I think it's about time for us to wrap up.
He's like, all right, you've talked enough Lord of the Rings.
Man,
We can
I
We
close.
could go
love
on
it
talking
though.
about Lord of the Rings. I can go all night.
Yeah,
Like,
same.
yeah.
No, but it's 10:30.
It is
So,
10:30. It is our normal time to close out.
Right.
oh, James,
I don't have any of the notes in front of me, so give me
what?
1 second.
You want to talk? We're talking
So
sponsors.
yeah, so if you've been here all night, you've listened to all the amazing music. That's over with our friends over at Monument Studios, who have currently over 5,000 professional audio sounds. And thanks to them, if you use the code Misfit, all one word, you can get either 30% off or 3 months free for their program. Also, as we talked about earlier, if you like Math Rocks, go check out our friends over at Canadian Dice for 15% off. You can use Misfit 15. And they have some
Canada.
cool
Woo.
dice. They also have a new Lord of the Rings set. So it's not the one ring, but you can get a ring in every single dice. I've
Mm.
already looked at it. I'm thinking about buying it. And sooner or later, we will update this, but currently there are Misfit and Beaker Build shirts over at Dungeon Grandmaster. We're going to add additional shirts for the Dress the Quest crew and hopefully some other things as we continue to grow. Um, Tomorrow, we're going to return to, I'm guessing, the Going Merry.
Yeah, we're gonna go back to the world of One Piece and hopefully finish up painting the crew, the Straw Hat crew.
Straw Hat Crew. And then Monday coming up.
Oh, you're missing a day, baby.
What am I missing?
Sunday.
Oh, is this our launch?
Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
All right. I'm gonna let you take over real fast. Tell us what's happening on Sunday.
Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 29th. It's our premiere for the Power Ranger RPG,
Yes.
and it's gonna be fun. We've already had our one shot with the crew, minus one because of illness. But we're starting, we're kicking it off. So yeah, we'll be here Sunday night. Be here.
So if you've never played or you've had a curiosity about Power Rangers and how it's played as a TTRPG,
You want to see
Chuck
what
does,
I enjoy?
Chuck does an amazing job as the Gridmaster. And we have a huge crew. We have this full team of 6 players that are going to be that are across the gambit when it comes to the community, and it's going to be awesome.
It's gonna be great.
I
They
listened
don't
into
know
the
what they're in
workshop.
for.
I was so excited to listen, and I'll be in the background and in the chat room, hyping everybody up because I'm super excited to watch this come to fruition. Um, so be there for Sundays. Monday night, back to Dress the Quest. Only it's going to be a Dress the Quest one shot because I'm not even sure if my office is going to be set up yet. Our Bard is going to be taking over with the one shot over there, and he's going to be running our crew and a couple other friends through a one shot down the bowels of a unicorn. I have no idea what that means, but
Wait,
this is where we're going.
what? Is that
Yes,
what was being
Okay.
advertised on the fucking Discord?
yes.
Damn it.
There might still be a spot open. I don't know.
I don't think I could play. I've got my other Power Ranger game.
Well, not my fault.
Ah!
The wonders of scheduling.
Uh,
And then next week we have another guest for Tavern Talks. Because I'm out of town and I don't have my calendar up right now, so I can't see what that is. But keep an eye on the social medias as we drop the next guests.
no.
Um,
Speaking of guests, our current guest, Will, if you would please, tell everybody where we can find you.
Okay. Yeah, the main spot is YouTube at Will at the World's End. From there, you can see all my videos, and then there's a link to a coffee page in there that has all my adventures you can download, as well as I've made a custom One Ring character sheet that's on there, a bit of a playthrough of Tales from the Lone Lands book. I've made a heroic culture for the Astari, so there's lots of stuff on there, which is all free, so you can check it out.
this guy gives all his stuff away for free, so go check it out. It's so cool.
I can't legally charge for it, so it's all free.
Man.
Awesome.
All right.
Passion right there.
I think with that, we're shutting down the tavern for the night.
We are.
Thanks so much for having me,
Alrighty.
guys. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was great having you. I know I was
for
quiet,
those-
but I was absorbing a lot.
Good.
I absorbed
Everybody
a
stick
lot.
around real quick as we raid some friends, and we're gonna head over to Nerd Immersion. Oh, where we had Cujo on last week. So
Cujo.
say hi. So, and they are
Bye.
playing in Fandelver and below. Oh, they're playing the Shattered Obelisk. So,
All right. Bye, everybody.
bye.